All right, guys, welcome back to the show. I'm Titus, and it's a pleasure, as always, to have you guys listening in. I appreciate everybody's support and everybody really dialing in, punching in those 5 stars, and going in on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We really appreciate it. It helps the podcast grow, helps others listen about it. I was talking to my dad today, and I said that we do not charge, nor do I ever plan on charging just to listen to this podcast. So all I ask is maybe just a little support, and you guys hitting that, and you guys always come through. So I appreciate that. Today we got a guest on, Elliot from Freelance Duck Hunting. I say guest, but really he's a friend, and he's been on here a few times now, maybe 3 or 4 times actually, and we have some good topics today. Elliot, it's good to have you on the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Titus. I always enjoy coming on and talking with you and being able to share myself with your listeners.
Yeah. And before we go any further, I just why don't you share with everybody everywhere they can find you?
Well, I've got a YouTube channel called Freelance Duck Hunting. I also have a podcast called North American Waterfowl Podcast, and then a second podcast that's all about dog training. It's called the Flatlander Kennels Podcast with Chris Jobman. On Instagram, it's just at Freelance Duck Hunting. So there's a variety of places I'm around a bit.
We're spread out, spread out
Right.
thin.
Right.
Yeah, I know the feeling. Well, it's good to have you on again, and I think we got some good topics. Even though we're out here in California, I think this topic with what's going on with Kansas laws and regs over there with fishing game. I mean, we call it fishing game. I don't know if you guys have a different verbiage, but it's something that is, I believe, going to move throughout all the other states. And I just want to hear some details about that. Let the listeners hear kind of things we need to keep our eyes open for and protect ourselves and stand up for certain things. But why don't we get into some of the new things that they're trying to introduce this year, Elliot?
Sure. Well, they have not signed anything or created any regulations yet, but every other month, the way that Kansas is set up, there is a commission. I think it's a 6. I can't remember how many people are on the commission, but there's a commission appointed by the governor, and they make all of the regulations dealing with fishing, hunting, trapping, all of that stuff. And they meet every other month. And these meetings are on YouTube. You can watch them. And so there's been a lot of talk the last few years about non-resident pressure on our public lands. Excuse my voice. I've got this throat thing, so if I'm a little scratchy, forgive me for that. But there has been a lot of talk from, I'd say, a small minority of very vocal people who feel as though the state of Kansas has just way too many non-resident hunters. So this has been a topic of conversation for 2 or 3 years by the commission, but they have not done anything at all. This year, 2 months ago, let's see, April, whatever it was, February, they had a commission meeting, and they announced that they were making a side committee that was with some commissioners, some managers of our area public land, and they were going to come up with some suggestions to deal with the non-resident pressure.
Mm-hmm.
So they met April 27th, and they rolled out there that what they would like to do is, as soon as possible, they would like to make it so that non-resident waterfowling, I think this is waterfowling only, I'm not positive, I'm pretty sure it's waterfowling only, would only be able to hunt on Sundays, Mondays, and Tuesdays throughout the entire year. So residents would be able to hunt 7 days a week. Non-residents would be able to hunt Sundays, Mondays, and Tuesdays. Now, I feel very, very certain that this is going to be passed with no problem.
Mm-hmm.
There was not a single commissioner or anyone in the audience that gave any kind of opposition at all to this idea. So I think they've got to bring it up to the committee 2 times They have procedures that they have. They call it workshopping it. And workshopping is just when they discuss it. So I believe they have to discuss it again in June, and then they can pass it, would be August. I'm not positive on those, but that's what I believe it is. But I think it's going to pass easily, and it's due to go into effect in the 24-25 waterfowl season.
Okay. Now, and that would start with till season all the way to the end, right?
Correct. Yes, it would be throughout the whole year. You come in, you can buy a license, but you only get Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and you cannot even scout or be on the water or grounds at all any other days. So you can't even go boat around on public now.
So what about literally driving and scouting? You can't do that?
Well, you could drive the roads, but you couldn't get out into the marshes, is my understanding. Yeah. And they are the Corps. So in Kansas, you've got Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks land. Then you've got Corps ground, Army Corps of Engineers, and then you have federal, and then you've got private, obviously. And there's a couple of rivers that are considered navigable rivers, where if you can get permission to get inside the banks, you can go wherever you want. And they feel like the Army Corps of Engineers on board with this, which means mostly reservoirs, main lakes. And then they think they can get the federal areas on board with it as well, but they're not as certain about that.
So it kind of sounds like there's still a lot of stuff that has to go through to get this done, right?
They have to get the regulations written in place. So they don't think they can get it done for this year, but they can get it done for starting 24. They feel very certain, and they have to put up a vote in front of the commission, and the commission just has to be a majority. It's funny. I haven't heard anyone outside of Kansas talk about this. In fact, there's a lot. Anyone I've talked to in Kansas hasn't even really heard about it. So this thing right now is really under the radar as far as national perception of it, as far as I can tell.
Well, let me ask you two questions here. First question being, how do you think the majority of resident hunters, all Kansas hunters, are going to feel about that? Just this one
I think they'll be thrilled.
Thrilled, right?
I think they'll be thrilled.
What's your thoughts on it?
I am a little bit torn about it. I personally, and where I hunt, I don't have a big pressure issue. I've worked really, really hard. Getting away from everyone has always been my number one goal. So I pride myself on finding places that are off the beaten track. But I can tell you that I don't really feel like that there's much of a problem where I hunt. I'm rarely within 300 yards of another person. Honestly, rarely within 500 yards. Yeah. So personally, I don't see it. I have been in areas where I have seen it. Not my main areas. If areas I know are really overpressured, I tend to stay away from them. Now I will say, if you look at the charts around 2013, so let me take a step back. We have the same number of people hunting in Kansas today as we did clear back to 2007, 2008. So the actual number of people hunting has not increased, but what has increased is the non-resident hunter. When the resident hunter is decreased and the non-resident hunter is increased. Okay. So somewhere around 2013, and don't quote me on these numbers because I saw the chart, but I'm just going off of memory, so I could be off a little bit on these, but these are basically correct. 2013, you had a high 20% of non-resident hunters, and the rest were resident, and now we're up to high 40s. I think it was 46% last year that were non-resident. So what's happened over this time frame is that the residents have stopped hunting as much, and the non-residents are hunting more. And what the perception is, and this is what even the Department of Wildlife and Parks people are saying, is the non-resident guys, when they come in, they are hunting relentlessly. They're, most residents in Kansas will leave the marsh about 9:30, 10 o'clock. And these guys are coming in from out of state, and they're hunting all day. Yeah. So it's not just that there's so many more non-residents, it's the number of hours they're spending on the marsh and pressuring. When they say pressure, it doesn't necessarily mean too many people. A lot of times they're meaning they're pressuring
On the birds,
birds.
yeah.
Right. And we're seeing a reduction in resident hunters, which the squeaky wheels who are really have pushed this forward will claim that it's specifically because the amount of pressure that residents are not hunting as much.
Do you believe that too?
I don't really know. I
Yeah.
don't really know. I mean, selfishly, the idea about there being less out of state guys
Right.
in the
Or
marsh
just
want to
hunters
hunt
in
it,
general.
and hunters in general.
Yeah.
My dad and I say, I'm not trying to kill a limit of mallards. I'm trying to kill a limit of mallards with no other person around.
Right.
That's my ultimate goal. So that idea seems wonderful to me. I am a little concerned about, once legislators start making
Yep.
regulations, they don't really like to stop.
Right.
So they're also adding about 5 or 6 places in the state where you cannot touch any of the water until 5 a.m. They're talking about gear restrictions, which would probably mean some type of shell restriction. So they're like going down this road of more and more regulations. There's a place where now they have a no wake zone where you can't get up on plane. And that's one of the biggest marshes in the entire United States. So they're going down this road of lots of regulations. I mean, if next thing, what are they going to do next? Be like, well, you got to be out of here by noon. Now at this place we're gonna draw 4 blinds. Selfishly, I really like this, and I don't have an issue with it. I do believe that we're sovereign states, and the residents of this state need priority in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
I honestly believe that. I don't know what that should be. This feels really aggressive to me, of a stance, but it's going to be great. It's going to be great. It's just where are they going to stop? In Arkansas, you can't hunt past noon. You can't use spinning wing decoys.
Yeah.
You can't, and that's my concern.
And we have places like that in California. So I wanted to ask you something about. Oh man, I knew I was going to lose that train of thought on that because you said the noon thing. We have places like that in California that allow that, and they are better known. But I will say the places that were known far and wide of how awesome they were, and it was like almost impossible to ever get drawn there. But to be honest with you, it's been that way for, I'm going to say 10 plus years, maybe 15 easily. And it's not made a difference in the birds. And I'll tell you what the problem with it, and I'm speaking specifically to here on this specific refuge, I won't say, but it's habitat and it's the food. And that's been the big key thing there. So I don't think noon restriction, in some ways, I know a lot of private clubs will do that, and it makes a difference, but that's also talking about guys that are really planting and really planning how they do things and getting the water there and putting the right food, feed in and stuff like that. So they're saying it's all about the noon restriction, and I know that's got a place, but like, how are you judging that when you put all this good habitat into a place, So
right. It makes me nervous. I just don't. I don't want them.
And
to
I
go
think I know why you're
right
nervous, and we're going to go into the other aspect. That's something that's been coming up with the YouTube thing. I don't want to quite jump in that just yet, but do you think? Well, let me back up. I have 2 questions here. I almost forgot the one. The one is, I've heard this, and I thought you said this in your podcast that was on with you recently. If you guys haven't, like Elliot said, go check out his podcast. I was just on there recently, and well, I guess that's probably not even aired yet, huh? That's not even out yet, so never mind.
Which one? Well, it will have aired by the time they're hearing this.
Okay.
I'm putting it out
this
Thursday.
So go check it out. And you guys really enjoy his podcast. I mean, if you like mine, you're definitely going to like his better podcast. But what I'm curious, Elliot, is I thought you said this, maybe I just heard this from somebody else, that a lot of people from the Carolinas are hunting Kansas. Is that true?
Yes.
Why do you think that? And I know there's Carolina listeners on here. I have a whole side of my mom's family's from Carolina, so I'm not picking on anybody. I was just curious, why do you think from all the way from over there? Because I mean, you guys, that's still a little bit of a trip. So what's the draw from those states?
what I have been told is that number one, guys, and a lot of guys in Carolina have a lot of money. Number
Okay.
two, the waterfowl hunting there is just not that great anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So they've got money. They're willing to travel. And my guess, it's not just Kansas. It sees a lot of South Carolina tags. I think they just travel well. Like I've never seen a North Carolina tag. But it's what I see mostly when out of state is not including Missouri, because that's, I don't consider border states is barely even to me, non-resident. I see places like Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, South Carolina. It's either down south and to the east, or it's South Carolina.
Okay. I'm still just like, if Matt ever listens to this, I'm wondering, like, okay, not that I'm saying Kansas isn't good, because I know it can be, but I mean, what about Nebraska? What about those same people, Oklahoma? I mean, there's gold mines there too. Missouri has great duck hunting. I'm just kind of wondering.
Right.
I don't know. I know not everybody's coming there.
Titus, do you know what year? I can tell you what year this non-resident avalanche started, and I don't really like to have this conversation, but I have to be real, was 2015 and on is when this started. And the YouTube waterfowlers, Josh and I started in 2015. Josh blew up in 2016. Bobby came along in 2017. So by 2017, you've got Josh and Bobby, the two biggest forces on YouTube and waterfowl.
In Kansas.
You've got The Grind, which is in Kansas all the time. A few years before that, Ducks Unlimited TV did like 7 of their hunts were from Kansas. This was, I think, I don't remember what year, something like 2012, 13, 14-ish. So you've had this onslaught of media from Kansas. Not only that, but then you've got everyone from down to Louisiana, Arkansas, just crying their eyes out about how they're not getting the mallards anymore because of the weather. And I think that, and Kansas is kind of the Wild West where, you can freelance it on public. There's not many restrictions. You can bounce from reservoir to reservoir. The scouting's really pretty easy. You've got the ice line riding back and forth. The later it gets, the better it gets with mallards. And so to me, it's just kind of the perfect storm of all eyes on Kansas. When, I mean, there's absolutely no reason that Nebraska shouldn't be the same thing, but I just think it's an onslaught of all of those things coming together.
Gotcha. Yeah, and like you said, that's not even easy conversation to have, but I was kind of wondering, if that's, so what I guess where I was kind of working myself into is, do you think that it stems from YouTube, which you already answered that, and then do you think that this is where all these other ones are just coming about, stemming from YouTube about the time restrictions and the speed and the no wake? Or do you think they're just pulling that from other states? Because I do know a lot of other states do that kind of stuff. Do you think they're just trying to make it just, because you're almost kind of semi-punishing the residents too with some of these in a way.
As far as the other restrictions, the no wake restriction came from the fact that that's out at Cheyenne Bottoms, which is the biggest marsh in the interior 48. It's absolutely massive. And guys were running on plane. And guides used to do this, where if it got slow, you could get up on your boat and just run around this marsh and kick up a bunch of birds.
Yeah.
And they had a couple incidents where people almost got run over because guys were just running the pools.
Yeah.
So that was isolated to that. The 5 a.m. rule started at a place called Neosho on the southeast part of the state, and that place gets overpressured like crazy. I mean, it can be filthy with people, and they created that to try to give the birds a few more hours in the night to be on those feed pools, because the birds start night feeding,
right? And
so their idea was, if we can keep the birds, people entering the marsh somewhere between midnight and 4 o'clock, if we can keep these pools free from people during those times, these birds can get more food and we'll keep them in the area longer. So those restrictions were really independent of any other reason, I think.
I'll play the devil's advocate advocate here. You were talking about run on plane with and not doing that, and then having the wake restriction, basically no wake.
Mm-hmm.
Part of me likes that. It's kind of a pain with a marsh that big, like you're talking about showing
Right.
bottom, but at the same time, let's not even talk about just kicking birds up so guys can shoot birds and they're just kind of spreading out, because I know exactly what you're talking about. But also just the noise, right? Like just the noise of even
Mm-hmm.
if you're not going to kick birds up, but you're just basically going from where you hunted to the launch. When you're on plane and you got mud motors, surface drive, whatever, and you're ripping through there, it's super loud, and you're flushing birds way far away that you wouldn't even flush if you were not making a wake, right?
Right.
So a backstory to that, I'm gonna have a guy locally here that's gonna be on the podcast. He's worked for Fish and Game for over 30 years, and I'm really excited to have him on. But he was talking about back in the day in some of these river systems that they used to hunt. He said that there was only, a few guys that hunted, and this is over 30 years ago. There was like 3 or 4 of them, and he said they all had the little Johnson 15 horse, 20, 25 horse motors, so super quiet. And the duck hunting was phenomenal, and you would do your hunt, no one bothered each other, and then you would get out of there. And he said it was just like something you dream about, right? Just mallards, just thousands of mallards. And I know this ain't the only issue. There's more to it than this, habitat and, people building and people moving in, whatever. But I just thought to myself, he was saying the biggest factor to me, he's like, the birds just get sick of getting flushed up and the loud noises in it. They may be 500 yards away, but with now the new motors and how loud they are, he said they're flushing up even out of those spots that are not even close to the boat or the hunter, So
Yeah.
I wonder if that will have some positive benefits in the end.
I think probably so. Not only that, but these pools out there. So if you imagine, let me set the stage for what this area looks like. It's a gigantic circle that used to just be a huge marsh. And so they cut it into individual pools. And there's probably, I'm not even sure, because they've got like A's and 4A, 4B. So it's like 6 or 7 pools out there, a couple of them being refuge. These are very, very shallow water marshes, and they can move the water back and forth from pool to pool. And so there's places like when Josh and I were out there, we went out there together on one of the Flywist Collective hunts, where we hunted, we couldn't have got to that without me going on plane
Yeah.
with the boat. So essentially what it does is it's making the pools bigger in a way also. Because now if some of your mud motors can't even get to part of these marshes, and like I said, these marshes are so large that when you get out in them, you can't tell, because a lot of times cattails, you feel like you're just engulfed in. You feel like you're in the middle of an ocean, especially on a windy day where you have cattails with the wind, and it's a spectacular place. So I'm okay with making any regulation they want to make these pools feel bigger and make the overall hunting satisfaction go up. I'm for. I think they should make more of these pools non-motor complete. There's only one pool out of all of them that are no gas powered motors, and I think they should do more of it. I'm for catering to everyone, so I kind of like these regulations out there.
How many people do you think they're going to be busting when this first comes out?
Well, that's the thing, is that we're very understaffed, so they don't really enforce much of it. I mean, you hear people shoot 10 minutes before shooting time. You see people shooting after shooting time, and they don't really have a lot of enforcement officers. So a lot of people are saying, well, this stuff isn't going to get enforced. Now, they do check licenses a lot. So if people are out of state, they will get busted. But as far as, wake regulations and not being on a pool until 5 a.m., they won't bust our anyone for that, just because they're not out there checking it.
Elliot, I can't remember. Do they offer a 3-day hunting license for non-residents before all this goes? Don't they offer that now, or is it like a 2-day?
I don't know. I've never checked into it, just because I've never used it. But I'm not sure if they. I would assume that they offer. Typically, places offer a 1, a 3, or a 1 and a 5, but I'm not positive.
Yeah. Okay. I was just wondering, because
I would assume
that's probably what's gonna. I mean, that's probably what they're gonna end up doing. I bet is something like that. where you just, if it's a 3-day deal, because like you said,
Right. Well, think about this side is if you are like a South Carolina guy
uh,
and you're setting to make a trip, you're going to do more than 3 days.
yeah,
So you're just not going to come to Kansas.
right,
I
right.
mean, you're not going to come in for 3 days and then typically go somewhere else. You're going to go to Missouri, to Nebraska, to you're probably what you're going to do is just not come to Kansas.
Yeah, for sure. And I wonder what the give it 5 years. I wonder what the aftershocks of that's going to be. Like you said, because you already just said it. They're going to probably go to Missouri. They're going to more
Mm-hmm.
go to Arkansas, Oklahoma, wherever. And then I wonder if that's just going to bleed over into these other states, saying, you know what, we're doing the same thing because now we're getting all your traffic. You know.
I hope not, because if Nebraska made that same policy, I'd be very, very disappointed. I'm literally half mile from the border.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that might. You just don't. Sometimes you don't really know the aftershocks of what certain decisions are going to do until they already happen. There's just no way.
Right, but no one followed South Dakota when they did their lottery. No one really followed suit with Arkansas. Arkansas
Yeah.
had some pretty tight legislation about when non-residents can hunt public. And so I don't know. I mean, Manitoba's doing their legislation. We'll see. We'll see what it is.
Now, one more thing, and maybe we'll switch gears here in a minute, but the YouTube deal, what's going on? I've been seeing the text and hearing some information. What's going on there with YouTube as far as
Well,
hunting
they
video?
have made a public statement that filming for if you have a business, even if that would be monetized YouTube video, if you have any sponsors, if you have any partnerships that you're pushing, that has been and is illegal in Kansas, and that they are going to beef up the regulations to make sure and say that. Now, that's not what everyone else has interpreted the regulation on the books as, because I've talked to people who have not interpreted it that way. It's pretty gray. But they have made a public statement that filming is and monetizing your video is not legal, which opens up a total can of worms, because with YouTube, even if you turn monetization off, they still run ads.
Mm-hmm.
So how are they going to figure it out?
Mm-hmm.
What are they going to do about the fishermen? What are they going to do about some
Right.
vlogger coming in and camping? What are they going to do about hikers? I mean, they are opening up the biggest can of worms right now.
And that's what I feel like this conversation comes up every year for the last 5 years. Maybe not just Kansas specifically, but just in general. And I feel like it always just drifts away. I mean, do you think
This one's not going to drift away.
You don't think so?
Yeah, this is not drifting away. This is absolutely, after they deal with the non-resident, this is next on their list of items.
And you're just saying is Kansas, as in just Kansas, or are you talking about everywhere?
Just Kansas, but I'm hearing that it's being talked about everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember who said that, but I don't remember where I heard that from, but it was a credible source. They may have said it on the commission meeting. I don't remember. I'm kind of in tune with people behind the scenes too, and I hear things from very credible sources.
Mm-hmm.
I've been told that this is being discussed nationwide.
Okay. Well, the thing is, like I said, that has been discussed a lot, and it does keep coming up. And my thought is, it's never ruffled my feathers at all. I'm not saying that yours or anybody else's, but like you said, it's so many parties involved. It has nothing to do with just hunting, though. I mean, it's like you said, it's photographers, it's vloggers, it's everything. Like everything.
Right.
There's so many things. There's no way. I don't see how they can tackle that. That's why I don't feel like it's gonna be an issue. I really don't. But
they will watch Josh and Bobby very closely, because I know for a fact those two are on their radar, because I've heard those names being mentioned behind closed doors, and they'll try to watch them closely and hit one of them if they catch them doing it. This is my guess.
Mm-hmm.
Or I would probably be on their radar fairly quickly as well. But I mean, how can they? It's not as, sometimes it's obvious to tell when you're hunting, but a lot of times it's not.
Right.
And like if I hop across the border and I'm in Nebraska, I'm only 30 minutes from Nebraska.
Right.
Are they going to be watching my videos and all of a sudden I'm going to get a knock on my door because I'm putting out content in Nebraska? Or what if I demonetize the video, don't talk about any sponsors, don't push any products, are they going to come and say I can't do that? It would, because if I'm literally pushing no product whatsoever, but I have sponsors, so if I go to Nebraska and let's say I talk about OnX, I talk about Final Approach, and I push the product in Nebraska, I monetize that video. Next weekend I'm hunting in Kansas, I demonetize, I don't mention any sponsors, I don't say anything. Are they gonna? How are they? They're gonna bust me for that? Well, and how are they going to tell? How are they even going to tell I demonetized because it's running ads? It's like,
yeah,
it doesn't make sense.
I feel like it's a losing battle though, Elliot, because it's, and you talking about them dialing in on Bobby and Josh. It's like, okay, well, let them do that, because I mean, unfortunate for them that have the bullseye on them. But my point is, there's so many outdoor channels and TV shows and YouTube channels that film deer hunts and whitetail hunts and this and that in Kansas.
Right.
So it's just, it must be waterfowl hunters that are in these positions of authority that are doing this attacking, and how are they going to have any leg to stand on? What, I mean, it's like,
they are encountering out-of-state hunters that are telling them that they have come to Kansas because of YouTube videos. I've had people contact me and people really mad at me on Facebook saying that whenever we ask someone in this part of the state, out-of-staters, why they're here, they mention your channel. And so that buzz is growing a lot, in part because of that, I believe. But if they're already fixing the non-resident issue, then, or then leave us alone, or just make it a permit-based thing. Make anyone that's going to do it get a permit, and that way, if they check me out there, that you have cameras, I say, dude, man, see your filming permit, right? Or I don't care whether it's $500 a year, I'd pay $1,000 a year.
Yeah,
probably. I mean, I don't know.
It's just funny to me because there's people will spend so much time on the stupidest of things. It's like, that's really what you want to spend your time on? Like, it hurts you that bad? Because like I said, I mean, it could be the same way. I've heard people say that about whitetail hunting in Kansas, like, oh, or different states. Oh, this, I go there because of this guy's videos or this YouTuber, and no one's, I mean, yeah, maybe people will have their little gripes about it. But here's the thing, and I want to change the topic here and get off this here pretty quick, but I want to do a podcast, and maybe it's not a whole podcast worthy, but at the same time, Elliot, I can't tell you how many times, and this is just waterfowl specific, not to include all the things I've seen for elk and deer hunting, because that's what I grew up doing too. And YouTubers, because they can put a face to it, is a lot easier to say, this guy did this guy ruined it, because they see a face, they see a name, they know the guy's from this place. So it's a lot easier to point the finger and be mad and have animosity towards that specific person. But what I always want to say is, what about Ducks Unlimited? What about Delta Waterfowl? What about California Waterfowl? What about this state places that put right up in their magazines? I've highlighted them, I've clipped them out. I'm like looking at them saying, look at right here. They're saying, look at this place. Not like, oh, this state. They're literally saying specific locations on where you really need to go duck hunting. And I'm like, how many thousands and thousands of people, and duck hunters specifically, are looking at this? Yes, there's probably a bigger reach on YouTube, but my point is, we're never saying where the location is. We're never saying specifics. We're never saying the town. We're never doing that kind of stuff.
Right.
Yet somehow, because there's not a face behind Ducks Unlimited, you could see who the editor is, or you can see who the person that wrote that specific story is. But they're straight up saying, since you've already mentioned the name, Cheyenne Bottoms. Like, Cheyenne Bottoms is well renowned for their blah, blah, blah. And I mean, it's right there. And I've never heard any YouTube duck hunters saying any area where they're at. I mean, maybe they have. I've never heard it personally, and I've never looked for it. But I'm just saying, like, where's the finger? How are those guys getting off of it? And because they do it all the time. I've seen it. I've seen it in big game.
Yeah.
American Hunter, all these big game magazines. I mean, they're like, you need to go to this ridge line way before Onyx was ever even dreamed of. A twinkle in the eye of the creator. They were they were putting places out like that. Colorado, go to the, Rifle Colorado if you're looking for big bucks, I've seen that since I was a kid. So,
Well, and Ducks Unlimited and Wildfowl Magazine do that as well, for sure.
yeah.
The place we went on, collab number 1, they named it by name
Mm-hmm.
within the past 4 or 5 months as a hot spot to go to.
Yeah. So, anyways, I'm not trying to like dig at somebody else. I'm just saying, like, I think really what it has to do is there's a face, there's a person. It's somebody you can have feeling toward because you can almost touch it and see that person, and you just like take it out, right? And when you guys have been talking about the stuff going on with Kansas, I was just thinking, it's just because it's an individual. There's a face behind it, and you can watch a video and you can decide to like it or hate that person just because whatever. Like, oh, they do it differently than me, or I don't like the way they look, or the way they laugh, or the way they explain. You know what I mean?
There's a lot of people that like to feel angry and hate, for sure.
Mm-hmm. So, anyways, all right, we've talked about that enough. I think if you're okay to move on, Elliot.
Sure.
We have a special guest that I've been really excited to have on the show. That's going to come on for a little segment here. I think you guys will like him, and I think you might be requesting him to come back. His name is Woody, and he has been on Elliot's show, I guess, probably every episode. Probably.
I did a whole episode. Yeah. He's been on 6 different episodes, at least a segment on 6 different episodes.
Yeah.
Of my podcast.
Now, Elliot, do you have that sound? Or no, that wasn't for that. That's something else. The comment of the day. Do you have a jingle for his introduction?
I don't, but I know I heard there's a rough draft of one floating around somewhere, but it hasn't been fully developed.
All right. Well, I was kind of hoping we could have a little jingle come in there. But guys, get ready to. Hopefully, you find him as funny as I do. But Woody, I don't know if you're on with us, but we'd like to have you come on.
Hello.
How's it going, Woody?
Hello. Yeah, I'm here. Yeah. Hey, listen, man, I'm doing great. Me and my wife, Miss Larnetta, we went to the Mexican restaurant tonight. They had the quesadillas tonight that were on sale. Tell you what, I ate all of mine and half of hers, so I'm feeling pretty good.
Great. Well, I heard you have some. I don't want to speak before it, but what do you have to share with us tonight? I heard some California stuff maybe floating around. I'm not sure what you had on the agenda.
Well, yeah. Elliot told me that he was kind of interested in my top 5 countdowns, and so I had one that I'd been working on, so I figured I'd share it with you tonight. It's before I get to it though, I want to ask you that are you one of them sub gauge fellers? Because I tell you what, I'm about sick to I'm getting so tired of all these boys wanting to shoot these little pea shooter shotguns.
I'm staring at a 28 gauge right now, Woody.
Oh. All right. Well, it's been fun talking to you.
Here we go.
Lord have mercy. What in the world do y'all have against a regular shotgun? Where you got to go shoot some Frenchy? You may have heard of my buddy Lynn Parsons. He and I, we've been best friends since we was little, and for some reason, I don't really know why, but years ago, this is about the only experience I've ever had. And where I'm come from, we just don't mess with them sub-gauge shotguns because we like to kill stuff. We don't just want to make noise. Anyway, Lim, one morning we was sitting there in the duck blind, and I heard fabric tearing, and it was just getting time to start shooting. I said, Lynn Parsons, did you rip your waders? He said, no, Robert, I didn't rip. Oh, I'm sorry. He said, I did not rip my waders. He said, I said, well, are you tearing up another pair of underwear? Did you forget your toilet paper again? He said, no, I didn't forget. He said, it's duct tape. I said, I said, it's time to shoot ducks. Why are you ripping up duct tape? He said, well, I had to run over to Mama's the other night. She had a couple of possums got underneath the house, and they was raising Cain under there. And so, anyway, I shot up all the 12 gauge shotgun shells I had trying to run them out. And By the time I got to the Western Auto store that night, they was about to close, and all they had out on the shelf was 20 gauge. And I figured there's only about 8 gauges difference between a 12 and a 20. So, he said, anyway, Rob, when I got home, I tried it out in the garage, and I put one of them 20 gauge and little yellow shells in my gun barrel, and he said it fell right out the other end. What's up? Well, Lynn Parsons, of course it did. A 20 gauge it ain't no bigger than your pinky finger. I said, so I still don't understand why you're ripping up duct tape. He said, well, what I'm doing, see, my buddy Lynn Parsons, he had an old single shot shotgun that he hunted with for years, and he could shoot that thing about as fast as you could shoot a semi-automatic. But anyhow, he was wrapping duct tape around the base of them shotgun shells so they wouldn't fall out of the barrel. He was trying to convert 12 gauge over into 20 gauge. I said, Lynn Parsons, son, I said, there's a lot of things folks might say about you, but one thing is for sure, you have an adapt and overcome mentality when it comes to things like this. Now, here's the thing, Titus, he hunted 3 more hunts doing the same thing. And every time I'd say, Lynn, why are you doing that? Go buy you some 12 gauge shotgun shell. He said, I don't want to waste the money. The boys, this was about 30 years ago. Shotgun shell, you probably don't know, because you probably weren't born back then. Me and Elliot do. Shotgun shells were so cheap back then. He spent $9 worth of duct tape to save $3 worth of shotgun shell.
How'd that work out for him when he shot those shells?
Well, the problem is when you heat duct tape up, it gets even stickier than it already was. So usually if it was wood ducks, he'd get 2 shots off. If it was greenhead mallards, he'd get 3 shots off on a bunch and usually make them all count. But with that duct tape on there, when he'd take the first shot, it'd get kind of hot and kind of welded in there like JB weld or something. And so usually he'd get 1 shot off, and then he figured out after the first hunt, he brought him a pair of channel lock pliers. And so he'd grab a hold and yank that shotgun shell out with all the duct tape on it. So he's only able to get 1 shot at a time, but it still worked out all right. He's usually able to scratch a few out.
Yeah. I need to meet that Lynn Parsons guy. I've heard about him a few times.
Sure. He is a character, man. All right. Well, I'm sorry. I got distracted there. I've got a top 5. Now, Titus, don't take this personally, all right? I was already working on this before I decided to come on your show here, before you invited me. I tell you, it's an honor. It really is an honor. I've been watching your videos for a while, and me and my buddy, old Clevitis, we made up that rap song for you there a couple years ago. And
I should have had that ready to play on here.
It got a lot of traction, I know. Yeah. Anyhow, so this isn't aimed at you specifically. It's aimed at all the California waterfowl hunting video guys, all right? Okay. So here's the top 5 things that the hunters from around the rest of the country just kind of can't stand about California hunters. All right. Okay. So here we go. Number 5. Number 5 is we can't stand the fact that y'all have a 7 duck limit. Titus, there's been times out here where I hunt that you could shoot 2 wood ducks and 2 greenhead mallards, and that's it. Now, if you happen to luck into a merganser or a shoveler or something like that, some kind of trash duck, you might shoot one of them, but otherwise you were stuck with 4 ducks. Now, it's got a little better, but still we ain't. My point is, why don't y'all save a few for the rest of us? Number 4, top 5 things we can't stand about California hunters, and that's toolies. What on God's green earth is a toolie? Is it a cattail or a bulrush or a buckbrush? Now, I've heard them Michigan fellas up there, they talk about them phragmites, and I don't really know what that is either, but I think it's got something to do with a bog. But what can you describe it for me? I hate to get distracted again, but what is a toolie?
Well, I mean, I'm not no biologist, but I mean, I'm trying to think what I guess it'd be compared to like what you guys have, like a bulrush or something. I mean, it's just a grassy. Well, let's put it this way. At the beginning of our season, they're green. I mean, they're full of water. They're green, lush. They've got that water. They're tall. Probably if you're standing out in the marsh, they could be upwards of 8-9 feet tall. Just really long, thick stem like. And then as the season progresses, even though it's in water still, they end up dying, and they turn tan, a light tan. By the end of season, everything's tan. No more green anymore. So basically, at the beginning of the season, it's green, green, green. And then at the end of the season, everything is tan. Like, no, I'm not going to say brown. It's literally tan. So that's the way I would describe a tule. And we get up in there and hide up in the tules. I not to get you sidetracked there either, Woody, but when you said trash duck on a spoonie or a shoveler, what did you exactly mean there? What are you talking
Lord
about?
have mercy sakes alive. Don't tell me. Oh,
that's the king of California right there.
Yeah.
You never
That's
ate it.
That's why y'all elect the governor like you got. That's exactly right there. Anybody that'll shoot a spoon.
I will agree with you. I will. There is a problem there. Okay. Well, I didn't want to pull you off.
All right. Well, that doesn't explain nothing. But anyway. Number 3, the abundance of pintails. Y'all shoot pintails like we shoot starlings out here. I don't understand it. I'll tell you, I've hunted since I was about 8 years old. I've shot 2 pintails in my entire life. Now, that still puts me 2 ahead of old Jordan Fromer. But I've killed 2 pintails in my entire life, and one of them a dog chewed up because the fella I had hunting with me wasn't worth his salt and didn't take care of his dog. And the second one, well, it blew across the lake in the opposite direction. And when me and Lem went to get the boat, it was one of them real cold days, and the boat was froze to the bank. By the time we busted the boat loose, it cracked the bottom of the boat, and we wasn't able. Anyhow, I ain't never really got to lay my hands on a real good-looking bull sprig pintail. And y'all, like I said, y'all shoot them out there like they're just a nuisance or something.
Yeah.
Again, why don't you save some stuff for the rest of us? All right, number 2. Let's move on before I get too upset here. Number 2 is reses. The only thing worse than a tule is a resi. What is a res? Is it a reservation? Is it a reservoir? Is it residential? What is a resi? Can you explain that to me?
Yeah, a reservation. Oh, that's funny. A reservation is where you basically pay $1.34 per hunt day per refuge that you choose. So you can say if there's 50 different hunt refuges, you put in $1.34 per day per hunt refuge to possibly get a reservation with a number of 1 through 20 or 1 through 50, where that's your entrance into that refuge. So you'd be the first person in, second person in, so on and so forth. So that's what
Golly Moses. Yeah. What a headache.
Yeah, it is. Hey, and to make you feel better,
I guess y'all deserve a 7-duck limit if you're going to have to put up with that kind of garbage.
Yeah. And to tell you the truth, I just did a podcast episode on that, and you will put in your odds for the worst place is like a 1 in 14 chance of even drawing. Nobody even wants to hunt that, and you still have a 1 in 14 chance. So the best place, the hardest place to draw is a 1 in 250. So Woody, you might as well put in for the lottery before you try to put in for a resi out here in California.
No, thank you. No, thank you. All right. That brings us to number 1 of the top 5 reasons that people can't stand California hunters. I got to be real honest. This one's just the green-eyed monster of jealousy, just like pretty much all the rest of them, which I tell you, I had no idea when I started out hunting years ago that California had, I didn't even think they allowed guns out there, except for, in the cities and stuff. But anyway, I had no idea that y'all shot ducks and geese and all the other kind of stuff. But I tell you, in all the years I've hunted, I have never even seen a cinnamon teal. And again, between the pintails and the cinnamon teal, yeah, I've just never seen such a thing in my life. And so I think a lot of hunters are pretty jealous of the fact that they might see one cinnamon teal fly by their entire hunting career. Y'all get tired of shooting them and start looking for shovelers or something like that.
Oh, man.
So that's your top 5. Top 5 reasons we can't stand. That's all in good fun. All in good fun. I'm totally kidding. You keep on cranking them videos out. I love watching them.
Yeah, well, Woody, hey, I appreciate you coming on here and taking the time, and love your stuff. And guys, you got to check him out. I'm gonna have to go dig through the archives because I shared that on my Facebook page.
Oh
Was it
yeah,
old
yeah.
Clavitis? Or you might have to send that to me again, Woody, and
Okay, yeah, I can send it to
we'll do
you.
a little. We'll do a little.
Lim
Man, I wish I would have had that ready.
Lim does all my technical stuff.
Oh,
He's the computer genius.
oh,
He
that's
don't like to
right.
talk much, but he does all the computer stuff for me. So I
Okay.
can have him send it to you.
Well, we're gonna have to play that over here on the podcast and let everybody get a little scoop of this. So stay tuned for that one. But
Oh yeah,
well,
yeah.
thanks again, Woody, for coming on.
Listen, anytime, brother, anytime. And I want to tell you something else. I appreciate the fact that you ain't ashamed of your faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. That
Thank you.
means a lot to me.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. We have some really good ones coming out. I did with my dad today that we talked about masculinity and what it is and the attack on it nowadays. But anyways, yeah, we try to do our best, and I appreciate you for saying that.
All right.
Well, thanks for coming on, and hope you have a good one. And I'll shoot a couple of cinnamon till for you this year. All right, guys, that was Woody, and really enjoyed it. You got to go check out Elliot's podcast. He's been on there, like Elliot said, about 6 times so far. I'm sure he's gonna be on there a bunch more. But man, I was choking half to death the other day. I was flying. I was listening to one of your episodes, Elliot, and I was just rolling. I can't even remember which one it was. It was one of those top 5. I want to say it was it possum jerky or something he was talking about. I can't remember, but it was so stinking funny.
The one that gets me is when Lim accidentally is going to the bathroom and gets his thing stuck in a zipper.
Yeah.
And I won't go to the little story, but he thinks that the guy hunting with him is a doctor, but he's a reverend, and he shows his thing to the reverend in the duck blind.
Oh Lord, I'm gonna have to go. What episode is that on, by the way?
Oh, I don't remember.
Oh man,
I don't
we're gonna have to
remember.
go. I'm telling everybody about them. We're gonna have to just play these on playback or go listen on Elliot's. But
yeah, I need to put it in the title whenever he appears so people can go pick him up.
or the description at least,
Right.
But all right. So we're sitting at 50 minutes. Are you good for another 20?
Yeah, whatever
30,
you need, man.
Whatever. Okay.
Whatever you need.
All right. So I was thinking about doing this topic by myself, guys, and then I thought, you know what? I really would like another perspective because it's number one, it's more fun having somebody else talk about stuff, but number two, it's just you getting things from different angles that maybe you didn't think about before. So, anyways, and that is the topic of water swatting. Or what other terms, Elliot, do people use? Water swatting. I mean,
Sluicing. Ground.
Sluicing.
For
water.
grout, they call it ground sluicing, I guess.
Yeah, ground sluicing. Also, just plain as day, if you don't know what neither one of those means, it means just shooting a duck on the water. Okay, so if there's any new hunters out there and you're not familiar with either one of those terms, that's what we're talking about. And it's become, I shouldn't say it's become a big thing, which I do think it is. And maybe it's been 10 years, 20 years, 30 years that it's grown to where people just really go off about that stuff. But whatever the time frame, it doesn't really matter. I just know that I have some old books, Elliot, and I've done it on this podcast before. I think it was called the Duck Hunter's Bible. I still have it. Have almost finished it. But the ways that they talked about killing ducks, and this was, it was in the 50s and 60s, I believe, when this book was written. So it's obviously to that current time and before. What their idea of ethical was so much different than it is now. It's unbelievable. And I don't know what's created that. We've had a lot of conversations. Is it social media? Is it this? Is it that? Blah, 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 whatever. It doesn't really matter. The whole point is I just want to talk to you. What's your thoughts on this topic? Kind of explain how you used to think about water swatting. What you used to think it was, because I've heard you say it on yours, like, this is the way I used to think was the legality of it. And explain that.
Well, so I started hunting, waterfowl hunting, about right when I hit the end of high school, beginning of college. We were upland hunters before that. So right around 90, 91 is when I started our waterfowl career.
So you were using
And
lead still. Sorry to cut in, but were you using lead still at that time? I think that's
they switched over. The first year we avidly waterfowl hunted was the first year
huh.
where
Okay.
lead was illegal.
Okay.
So we got in on the trash steel that couldn't
Yeah.
kill anything.
Yeah.
I mean, and we actually talk about that on my recent episode with Joel Strickland, because my dad started reloading. Anyway, so from the start, we were shooting steel, but
Okay.
we always thought it was illegal. For some reason, we had in our head that it was illegal to water swat.
Mm-hmm.
And man, years went by. I mean, we just never did it, never thought about doing it, thought it was illegal, but we just never even talked about it. We always flushed ducks off the water.
Mm-hmm.
More so teal than anything else, because I don't normally let birds get to the water.
Right.
I know a lot of people want to set them down and flush them up. I like killing my ducks about 10 yards off the water hovering. Mm-hmm. I think that's just the most fun. When they go into that hover mode and they pause and drop a little bit, I just love shooting them right there. You get a good visual, you get a good splash for the dog. Mm-hmm. That's my zone. So I don't typically land birds or let them land. Now teal land on you. They're so fast that they'll just be in the decoys and they'll land before you even know what you're doing. So we were flushing them, and I have habitually been terrible at killing teal off the water. I don't know why. When I flush teal and try to kill them, my shooting percentage is terrible. And this went on for years. And so one hunt, this was actually the first year I was filming, 2015. My dad, when he kills a duck, he likes to kill it right as its toes touch the water.
Yeah.
So it's coming down right when its toes hit. That's when he likes to pull the trigger. And so I got to teasing him about whether he was water swatting or not. And I had my 5th video ever. I was doing a lot of teasing with my dad about it. And I was like, I'm going to film this and show you that it, you're going to get in trouble. It's illegal. And so I had people commenting on the video, hey, it's not illegal. It's not illegal to water swat. And so I don't have any idea why I thought it was. I looked it up, and sure enough, it's not illegal. So from that point on, during teal season, I will water swat some teal.
Yeah.
I still prefer to kill them out of the air because it's just more fun. But if they're especially when it's a little dark and I know I can start the hunt on, I'm not sure if it's going to be a great hunt. I got a teal on the water. It's legal, but it's a little dark and I can just easily kill it. So I started doing that some of the time. And all of a sudden, man, it's like, I didn't realize this. Apparently this really pisses a portion of hunters off. Like, they are, in my way of thinking, they are unreasonably emotional about it. They'll call you names. They'll stop watching your channel. And I just what in the world? I just so caught me off guard because I had no idea that people were so emotional about this topic. And anytime I talk about water swatting, which I've talked about it exhaustively on my podcast, Jordan and I talked about it on the Duck Gun podcast. It's all about the emotional response that people have to it, and why they get so angry about it. I don't have a problem with water swatting because when I water swat, I kill them. I mean, I can't think of now, unless you have like a mallard that lands at 45 or 50 and you're trying to water swat that. I've seen those birds get away a few times. But outside of that, I mean, I bet you my shooting percentage on water swatting birds is 95. I mean, I just don't ever.
Right.
It always kills them. And so I don't have an issue with it. If you don't want to water swat, that's fine.
Right.
If you want to water swat, that's fine. I'm non-emotional about it because I don't think it makes a difference.
That's a good point, because you're talking about the emotion of it, and I don't understand that as well. Unless it's, I guess maybe, do you think people are getting emotional about it because they think it's unethical? Is that why they're getting
Now, here's my theory. Here's Jordan and I talked about this for a long time, and here's what we together kind of our theory. Now, the book that you're reading, you're talking about may dispel this, but our theory was back in the market hunter time frame, they use those big punt guns, right?
Yeah.
And they would put these huge shotguns on a boat. They would float it out there, and I think sometimes they even had like a string on the trigger. and they would shoot these things and just slaughter
Mm-hmm.
with one shot tons of ducks on the water.
Mm-hmm.
Well, at some point they outlawed market hunting for waterfowl, and my guess is that it's separated to, well, we're duck hunters, but we're sportsmen. We would never do that. We would never be like the market hunters. We would never shoot them on the water. And so then when you were a sportsman, you identified yourself like that, away from the market gun hunters, saying it's not ethical to do that. It's not sportsman to do that, and really looked down on it, and then taught that to their sons. Their sons taught it to their sons. And so from, I think that, I think market gun hunting ended in the 20s somewhere, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Don't know.
Something
But
maybe a hair later, but I can't remember exactly.
and it got passed down that this is unethical, this is
Mm.
unsportsman, and the emotions of it got passed down. That's our hypothesis.
Yeah.
To it.
I think that's a pretty good one. It's definitely how you were taught by your mentor, right? Travis was my mentor, and we never did that. But when we did, it was if we water swat them, it was for a specific purpose, or we didn't have a good shot on it. It was like you said, it was never a far shot. It was just kind of like maybe the angle, or like, I can't tell you very many situations, but when we did it, I was never like, oh man, don't ever do that again. Like, that was so unsportsmanlike. It was never a conversation we ever had. Not saying, like you said, if that's how you were raised and that's how you want to train people that you mentor, I don't have a problem with that if you feel that way. Like, but I just don't see, like you said, to go off the hook and off the chain on other people about it is just like, man, I can't believe you are that upset about that. You know,
it logically doesn't make sense.
It really doesn't. But I'm trying to play both sides, right? I'm trying to understand, because especially in our position, Elliot's, with podcasts and stuff and and YouTube channels and all that, we've talked about this. You learn to be a little bit more not so quick to answer, or quick to respond, or maybe so dogmatic about something. Yes, you can have how you believe and stand by it, but at the same time, you do want to take the time to hear other people's reasoning and wonder and try to figure out why. You know,
I just have never heard a good argument.
I know, and you've been trying.
I put it out there on 2 episodes.
Yeah.
That if anyone felt really emotional about it, to come on the podcast with me and have a civil conversation. And I don't think a cohesive, logical argument can be made to why you should feel very strongly about this topic.
I don't either. I think when something's so rooted and ingrained into you, and I'm definitely not comparing duck hunters that don't want to water swap birds compared to, like, I hate to be too crazy here with this. Don't take me wrong when I say this, Elliot, but like people that grew up with racist families, right? Like, they were born into it. Literally, they were little children. They grew up under that whole mindset, and how this race or that race is bad, whatever. And they had basically a hatred in their heart, and they had no reason to have that, like, other than it was emotionally put in them by their parents, right? So, like, I know that's a terrible analogy, but it's the best way I can describe such a strong emotion, is that was put in somebody so strong that without even taking the time to think about, why do I believe the way I believe? You know, is this logical? Is there a reason for this? Is there a good reason? Because spiritually speaking, to use a different analogy, is I don't want to raise my kids. My parents didn't raise me to just believe dogmatic things and believe certain ways because they said, but they wanted me to find out for myself, right? They wanted me read the Bible for yourself and let it speak to your heart and your life the way it should. And then that's where you make your judgment from what it says, because it's black and white, right? So I know I'm kind of using crazy analogies here, but I think
those analogies work.
I'm just trying to understand, right? Like, so let me give my illustration about what I think of when people have a problem with that. So, this is how I feel about it. Jumping a bird, I shouldn't say it like this. I'm going to try to dumb this down and not sound so kind of extreme about it. But like, I'll just say what I wrote down. Jumping birds in the decoys. If you want to say, hey, get up. I've done that before. Like, hey, you're trying to get him to jump up or whatever, right? But always thinking that's the only way to do it, and is to me as dumb as scaring a deer that comes into your stand when you're shooting a rifle. That's how I feel. Like if I fooled a bird, let's say if I'm looking left to my left, right? And a bird comes in, I didn't get a chance because I wasn't noticing it coming in from my right when I was looking to the left. And it just came out of nowhere and boom, it plopped right down in my decoys, right? And I look over and it catches me off guard and I move and put my gun over on it and it's not jumping and it's seen me move, but it's still not going nowhere. I've jumped him. 50% of the time I'll jump him and shoot him, and 50% of the time I might just shoot him on the water because, like you said, 100% I'm hitting that bird every single time. Mm-hmm. And could be another dumb analogy, but when you're sitting in a deer stand, you're freezing your tail end off, you've been sitting there for 3 straight days for 12 hours a day, and that buck comes in that is a shooter buck, and he's walking in, you're being quiet, you're not moving. He gets in right in range, and he's 30 yards away, and you have a rifle. How is that any different? Shooting that buck with a high-power rifle at 30 yards, why shouldn't that deer hunter go, hey, and let that deer have a sporting chance to run while he shoots at that? What is the difference between that and a deer? If you have one, definitely tell me, but I'm trying to what's the difference there?
Right. I think they would probably, and
what would someone say to that?
This way. I don't think they would quote it this way, but I think what they would mean would be value of life of a deer. We had that conversation about value of an animal life, and I think that people value deer more than they do ducks. So I think that you'd probably get some form of answer that in a roundabout way would say that.
Now, when you say value of life, I've heard you use that term before, but are you saying they value? But if that's the
one
case,
deer more than one duck.
Okay, well then that being said,
there's more meat,
right? But that being said, then so you're saying these people value the life of a duck less? What are the same people saying that's not sporting to shoot them on the water? That doesn't even make any sense.
Right. It doesn't. I mean, the main arguments, and you've kind of touched on them, intertwined them a little bit. The main arguments are people either say that it's unsporting and you should give an animal a sporting chance, or they'll say it's unethical, or the worst one of the three is that they will say it's harder to kill a duck on the water, which is not my experience, but
that's
right. So unsporting. To that, I say that I want to kill it dead. That's the most important thing, is that it's limiting its pain and suffering is the most important thing. Mm-hmm. So sporting has no place in that type of an argument, has no place when we're taking the life of an animal that we want to dispatch as humanely as possible. Mm-hmm. And unethical, I don't have any idea what they mean by unethical, unless they're tying that into the idea that its organs are submerged under water and you're going to hit mostly feathers, and so it's actually harder to kill a bird on the water than it is flushing it, which is absolutely not my experience. Mm-hmm. But neither of those arguments are, to me, make any good solid rational sense.
Yeah, because I mean, like I said, the same people that are if it's value of life and they're so concerned about deer, which is you should be, you don't want to wound an animal and see it run off. But if you're valuing the life and you think, again, that's unethical, then that means you're lessening the value of the life of a duck, which is the argument you're making to not shoot it on the water. So it just
right. And can I give them an argument? Here's the argument I think that they should say. Mm-hmm. I think that they should say waterfowl hunting is steeped in tradition, mm-hmm. and tradition matters. Mm-hmm. And this is a wing shooting sport, and the way that the public perceives us is important, and we need to hold to our traditions, and we need to be wing shooters and not shoot them on water, because on video it can be a little bit more of a gruesome, bad look. and it's outside of our tradition, and traditions matter, and therefore we really need to stick with our backstory of being wing shooters as a community. I think that's really and I've never heard anyone say that argument, but I've thought about this topic so much, I've kind of come up with an argument for them.
Mm-hmm.
That's, I think, their only feasible argument to say you shouldn't do this would be that.
Yeah. And again, I'm definitely not being defensive about, like, if anybody wants to do that, it's totally fine, and I think that's great. Right. But there's been times, like you've mentioned, that I wish I would have shot him on the water. Like, for instance, right at shooting time, if it's overcast and it's 10 minutes after shoot time, and the bird lands on the water, and I've hey, and they've lifted off, and as soon as they lift off, I can't see them. Like, right. They blend in with the background because of the trees or whatever's on the bank that blends in. And it's like, I mean, at that point, you just decide not to take the shot or whatever. But there has been times I have taken that shot, and I'm like, man, that was stupid. If I would have just shot him on the water, I could see him clear as a bell. But as soon as they lift it off, So, again, you could say, well, don't shoot at all. Just wait 30, 45 minutes after shoot time. And we've done that too. It's just, I think a lot for me, it depends on, it's really situational dependent, and again, so I wrote this thing, Elliot, see what you think. I put this on, I was trying to find it while you're talking, and I have my stories on Instagram save automatically to my pictures. So on December 13th, 2022, just this last season, I wrote in here, these are the things I've heard over the years, and I could not believe how my DMs blew up when I wrote this, in a good way, actually, surprisingly, but I think because it makes a lot of sense. So that's what I wrote. I said, comical to me what duck hunters think is ethical. I'll let you comment on this if you want when I'm finished reading it. It says, comical to me what duck hunters think is ethical. These are things I've heard over the years, meaning the last 6 years, whatever. Number one, if you shoot them at 40 yards, that's sky busting. You're unethical. Number two, if you shoot them at 5 yards, you'll ruin the meat. You're unethical. Number three, if you shoot them on the water in your decoys, you're unethical. Number four, if you shoot them passing right to left or left to right, you're unethical. That's pass shooting. I said not much you can do right after that, but here's a shot in the dark. You have to shoot ducks 15 to 30 yards away, coming straight at you, backpedaling, feet down, but not touching the water. If you can't do that, don't shoot. You're unethical. I mean, and if you think about it, that's exactly what you have to do to be ethical to some people.
Right. Right. Can I add some to those?
Yes.
If you shoot into a big flock, you're unethical.
Mm-hmm.
If you shoot into a big flock, if you have to have more than 4 people in order to be ethical. If you don't shoot at everything within range, you're unethical. I've heard those as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Why doesn't everyone just allow everyone else to kind of be themselves, or just get off the word unethical and just like think about, like, is it your preference or is it
yes?
Like, actually think about what the word unethical means. It's unethical to have a wounded bird in your hand, throw it in the pile, and not dispatch it.
Yeah.
That is unethical.
Mm-hmm.
But, some of this other stuff, it's just like, I think people are using that word just way too flippantly.
Well, in the dictionary, this is just the Webster's, it says unethical. It's lacking moral principles, unwilling to adhere to proper rules of conduct, which that could, rules of conduct, or number two, not in accord with the standards of a profession. So, there's these certain standards that our fathers have set, what is right.
So unethical for the sport, right? Okay,
yeah,
that makes sense.
So, but anyways, yeah, it's
that's great. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something that I like to be challenged anyways. So the point is I want to be somebody that can be challenged and questioned, because there's been times, especially when I first started doing YouTube, you're putting yourself out there, man. I mean, you're really asking for it. You didn't. Yeah. I didn't realize that until I started getting feedback, and I'm like, I feel like I have done some things in the past that if I wasn't videoing, I probably wouldn't have done, only because I was more thinking about video than I was, okay, this bird's still squirming, this bird's still blinking. Instead of holding the bird up for the camera, dispatch that bird. Right. And so I'm glad I have learned some things from putting myself out there. Like, yeah, you're right. Good call. Good catch. I was wrong. I should have paid attention that the bird wasn't fully dead yet. Dispatch the bird, So good things can come out of it. And unfortunately, sometimes it's at your expense because you're putting yourself out there. So you kind of ask for it.
Yeah, it's vulnerable. It's a vulnerable thing, especially if you're going to just let your true personality just kind of be there on display. It's certainly vulnerable because everyone's judging you, whether it's positive or negative. Everyone's evaluating. I think that we use the word judging improperly in this country. It's really evaluating, right? Evaluating what they think of you as a person, and it's a vulnerable thing for sure.
Yeah. Well, hey, it's getting late at your hometown. I appreciate you coming on, Elliot. Really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Anytime. I hope that we continue to do this a little more often because I always love the conversations.
Yeah, same here, and we will hopefully every month or two just come back on and be on each other's shows. And guys, go check them out. Go check out the North American Waterfowler Hit Podcast with Elliot as the host, and also all his social media: Freelance Duck Hunting, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. You got a Patreon over there. How do you find that Patreon, Elliot? If people want to look at
patreon.com/freelance duck hunting.
Okay.
Patreon. Patreon.com/freelance duck hunting, which is more and more of an important place with everything going on with YouTube.
Yeah, right. I know.
Sure.
I keep asking you about if I should get one of those going, and I just keep putting it off. But
well, I know that you're not. You've been. It's just that people don't realize, number one, that people think we make a lot more money on YouTube than we actually make.
Right.
I know that for a fact.
Yeah.
Because when I'm happy to tell people what I make on there, and people are always surprised how little it is. And we put hours and hours and hours and hours into this. We do it because we love it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we still, you've got a podcast, you've got a YouTube channel. It's hours of love and labor. And so, any way that people can support us is certainly appreciated.
Yeah. And it's well worth it because there's stuff on there you're going to see on there that you won't see anywhere else. So anyways, well, thanks again, Elliot, and I hope you have a good night and appreciate you coming on. And guys, check them out, and we will see you guys on the next one.